The arrival. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the Santa Clarita landscape as Keanu Reeves guided his car along the winding roads. The purr of his engine provided a stark contrast to the serene countryside surrounding him. In the distance, the silhouette of the Willow Creek storage facility emerged, a stark industrial interruption to the natural beauty of the area. As he pulled into the gravel parking lot, the crunch of stones under his tires seemed to echo the tension building in his chest. This wasn't just another film project, it was a favor to Elliot Grayson, a respected colleague who had specifically requested his participation despite knowing his troubled history with the director, Martin Langston. The facility's exterior bore the marks of its industrial past, faded signage, weathered walls, and scattered wooden pallets creating an almost post-apocalyptic atmosphere. But inside, the space had been transformed into a makeshift film studio, with high ceilings supporting industrial lights on chains and plywood walls draped in black fabric creating distinct shooting spaces. Elliot spotted him immediately, excusing herself from a conversation with a harried-looking production assistant. As she navigated through the maze of equipment and crew members, Keanu couldn't help but notice the weight of responsibility evident in her shoulders. "Keanu," she called out, embracing him warmly. "Thank you for coming all the way out here. I know working with Martin isn't easy for you." He returned her embrace, offering a genuine smile. "Don't mention it, Elliot. We've always worked well together." Drawing him aside to a quieter corner, Elliot revealed the true stakes of the production. "There's something you should know," she whispered, glancing around to ensure their privacy. "I'm co-producing this film with a private investor. We're keeping it under wraps for now, planning to announce it in 4 weeks." The revelation added another layer of complexity to an already delicate situation. Keanu understood now why Elliot seemed to carry such tension in her frame. "I appreciate you telling me this," he assured her. "You can count on my full commitment." As they moved toward the preparation area, Keanu's mind wandered to his last encounter with Martin Langston. The argument had been intense, fueled by Martin's notorious perfectionism that often crossed the line into tyranny. But Keanu had made peace with that history, or so he thought. The makeup process was minimal, reflecting both the production's tight schedule and the natural look required for his character. Throughout the preparation, Elliot remained nearby, her presence a steady anchor amidst the controlled chaos of the set. When they finally stepped outside to meet his equine co-star, Keanu felt an immediate connection to the magnificent brown horse drinking from a water trough. Stella, as she was called, possessed a quiet dignity that commanded respect. Berto, the animal caregiver, and Rel, the farm representative, introduced themselves and provided treats for Keanu to offer Stella. With careful, measured steps, he approached the horse, speaking in soft, soothing tones. "Hello, beautiful," he murmured, holding out a carrot on his flat palm. "We're going to be working together today. I hope we can be friends." Stella accepted the treat with gentle delicacy, her intelligent brown eyes studying him with curiosity. As Keanu continued to bond with her, offering praise and gentle touches, he felt a sense of peace wash over him. But the tranquil moment was shattered by Martin Langston's arrival. The director's presence seemed to alter the very air around them, introducing a current of tension that even Stella could sense, her muscles tightening slightly under Keanu's hand. "Ah, Keanu," Martin called out with forced joviality. "I see you've met our star." Keeping one hand on Stella's neck, both to calm her and ground himself, Keanu turned to face his old adversary. Martin's attempt at an apology for their past conflicts felt hollow, his words rehearsed and his smile not quite reaching his eyes. "Water under the bridge," Keanu responded diplomatically, though he couldn't shake the feeling that something was off about the director's demeanor. Martin quickly shifted gears, his impatience showing through his professional veneer. "We should begin filming immediately. We're on a tight schedule, and daylight is burning." As they prepared to walk to the shooting location at Willow Creek Farm, Keanu noticed something in Martin's bearing that set off warning bells in his mind. The director's seemingly casual glance toward Stella carried an undercurrent of something darker, a hint of barely contained frustration or perhaps even malice. What Keanu couldn't know then was that this day would test not just his acting abilities, but his moral courage as well. The peaceful afternoon would soon give way to a confrontation that would shake the entire production to its core, and force him to stand up against a darkness that lurked behind the cameras. As they began their walk to the filming location, Keanu kept a watchful eye on both Stella and Martin. Something told him this shoot would be anything but ordinary, and his instincts had rarely led him astray. Dark revelations. The walk to Willow Creek Farm took them through a narrow trail bordered by ancient oak trees. Keanu stayed close to Stella, occasionally murmuring words of encouragement as Berto led her carefully along the path. Behind them, Martin's impatient footsteps crunched against the gravel, his mounting tension palpable in the afternoon air. The farm itself was a picturesque location that seemed pulled from a postcard, rolling hills dotted with wildflowers, weathered wooden fences, and a classic red barn in the distance. But the beauty of the setting was somewhat marred by the controlled chaos of film equipment being set up by hustling crew members. "We're burning daylight." Martin barked at a young grip struggling with a light stand. The crew member flinched, nearly dropping the equipment. Keanu noticed how the entire crew seemed to tense at the sound of Martin's voice, their movements becoming more hurried but also more erratic. Elliot appeared at Keanu's side, her clipboard clutched tightly against her chest. "The scene is relatively straightforward," she explained, though her voice carried an undercurrent of concern. "You'll be riding Stella along the fence line, then dismounting to deliver your lines about finding peace in the simplicity of ranch life." "Shouldn't be a problem," Keanu replied, patting Stella's neck. The horse had remained remarkably calm despite the bustle around her, though her ears twitched at every sharp sound from the director. The first take began smoothly enough. Keanu mounted Stella with practiced ease, and they began their slow walk along the fence line. The camera dollied alongside them, capturing the golden afternoon light as it played across the scene. Keanu felt at one with the horse, their movements synchronized, natural. "Cut." Martin's voice shattered the moment. "The horse is walking too slowly. We need more energy, more drama." He stormed toward them, his face flushed with anger. "This isn't some petting zoo commercial." Berto stepped forward, his usually calm demeanor showing signs of strain. "Sir, we need to maintain a steady pace for safety and—" "I don't need a lecture about horses," Martin snapped. "I need this scene to work." Again. The second take went much the same way, as did the third and fourth. With each cut, Martin's criticism became more pointed, his gestures more aggressive. Keanu noticed how Stella's ears would flatten against her head whenever the director approached, how she would shift nervously under him. During a brief break between takes, Keanu overheard a whispered conversation between two crew members. "Just like yesterday," one murmured, glancing nervously at Martin. "Remember what he did to Stella when we were rehearsing?" "Shut up," the other hissed. "You want to lose your job?" The exchange sent a chill down Keanu's spine. He looked more closely at Stella now, noting what he hadn't seen before, subtle signs of stress, a certain wariness in her usually confident bearing. Something had happened during those rehearsals, something the crew had been too afraid to speak about. As the sun began to dip lower in the sky, Martin's frustration reached a breaking point. During what must have been the 20th take, Stella hesitated slightly at a rough patch of ground, a perfectly natural response that any experienced rider would understand. Martin exploded. "Useless animal," he shouted, striding toward them with purpose. Before anyone could react, he had grabbed a riding crop from a nearby equipment table. The crack of the crop against the fence post made everyone jump. Stella reared slightly, but Keanu's steady hand and soothing voice quickly calmed her. The look he gave Martin could have frozen hell itself. "That's enough," Keanu said, his voice quiet but carrying an steel edge that made even Martin pause. "We need a break." We need to finish this scene, Martin countered, still gripping the crop. And I'll get what I need, one way or another. Elliot intervened, her producer instincts kicking in. 10 minutes, everyone. Water break. She gave Keanu a meaningful look, one that seemed to say both, thank you, and, be careful. As the crew dispersed, Keanu dismounted and led Stella away from the set, Berto following close behind. Once they were out of earshot, Berto spoke in a hushed, urgent tone. Mr. Reeves, there's something you should know. He glanced around nervously before continuing. Yesterday, during rehearsals, when no one important was around. Martin, Berto struggled with the words. He has a way of making sure no one's watching, but I saw him. The things he did to Stella. Keanu's jaw tightened as Berto described what he'd witnessed. The animal handler's voice shook with a mixture of shame and anger as he revealed how Martin had systematically abused Stella when he thought no one was looking, using the horse's reactions to fuel his artistic vision. Why hasn't anyone reported this? Keanu asked, though he already knew the answer. Fear of losing jobs, fear of being blacklisted in an industry where reputations meant everything. Martin has connections, Berto explained. And he makes sure there's never any proof. Always careful about that, at least. Keanu ran a hand along Stella's flank, feeling the subtle tremors that ran through her powerful frame. He thought about all the times in his career when he'd witnessed abuse of power, the times when people looked the other way because it was easier, safer. Not this time, he murmured, more to himself than to Berto. The sun was setting behind the mountains now, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. In the growing shadows, Keanu began to formulate a plan. He knew confronting Martin directly would only make things worse. The director would deny everything, and the crew members who had witnessed his abuse would be too afraid to speak up. No, this would require a more subtle approach, one that would ensure Martin couldn't wiggle his way out of the consequences of his actions. As the call came for everyone to return to set, Keanu gave Stella one final pat. I've got your back, girl, he whispered. We're going to make this right. The last rays of sunlight caught the determination in his eyes as he walked back to the set, his mind already working through the steps he would need to take. Martin Langston was about to learn that some people couldn't be bullied into silence, and some actions couldn't be hidden in the shadows forever. What happened next would send shockwaves through the entire production, but first, Keanu needed to gather evidence. As he took his position for the next take, he caught Elliot's eye and gave her a subtle nod. Something in his expression must have communicated his intent, because she nodded back, her eyes showing a mixture of concern and relief. The real drama was about to begin, and it wouldn't be the kind that Martin could control with his director's chair and riding crop. Building the case. The next morning arrived with a heavy fog blanketing Santa Clarita, matching the somber mood that had settled over the production. Keanu arrived early, well before the scheduled call time, parking his car in a different spot than the day before, one that offered a clear view of the makeshift stables where Stella was kept. He wasn't surprised to find Berto already there, tending to Stella with gentle hands and worried eyes. The animal handler's shoulders tensed when he heard footsteps approaching, relaxing only when he recognized Keanu. You're here early, Mr. Reeves, Berto said, his voice barely above a whisper despite the empty lot. Keanu pulled out his phone, bringing up a series of apps he'd downloaded the night before. I need your help, Berto. But before I explain, I want you to understand that you can say no. Your job, your safety, they come first. Berto's expression hardened with resolve. After what I've seen, I'll help. Whatever it takes. Over the next 30 minutes, Keanu laid out his plan. He'd spent most of the night researching animal abuse laws in California and the proper channels for reporting violations in the film industry. But more importantly, he'd thought about how to gather evidence in a way that would be impossible to dismiss or cover up. Martin's careful about witnesses, Keanu explained, showing Berto the small, high-quality audio recorder he'd brought. But he's not as careful about what he says when he thinks he's only talking to crew members he can intimidate. As they talked, Elliot arrived, her presence both expected and welcome. Keanu had sent her a carefully worded message the night before. She listened intently as Keanu outlined what he needed from her: access to production schedules, crew assignments, and most importantly, her trust. "I could lose everything if this goes wrong," she said, not as a refusal but as a statement of fact. "You could lose more if we do nothing," Keanu replied softly. "I've seen productions fall apart from the poison of unchecked abuse. It never stays contained to just one target." The truth of his words hung in the morning air. Elliot nodded, pulling out her tablet to show them the day's shooting schedule. Martins insisted on keeping the crew minimal for the morning shots. Just him, 2 camera operators, and basic support staff. He claims it's to keep Stella calm, but it's really to minimize witnesses, Keanu finished. "That's our opportunity." The plan they crafted was methodical, each person playing to their strengths. Berto would maintain his routine but wear the small audio recorder Keanu provided. Elliot would ensure certain crew members, those who'd witnessed previous incidents, were strategically placed around the set. And Keanu would do what he did best: observe, listen, and be ready to act. As the rest of the crew began arriving, Keanu noticed something he'd missed yesterday: the way certain crew members moved in protective clusters, how they developed subtle hand signals to warn each other of Martin's approach. It spoke of a long-established pattern of abuse and fear. The morning's shoot began with what should have been a simple scene: Stella grazing peacefully in the background while Keanu delivered dialogue about second chances and redemption. The irony wasn't lost on him. Martin arrived in a foul mood, his face already flushed with barely contained anger. "The horse needs to be exactly 15 feet from the fence," he snapped at Berto. "Not 16, not 14. 15. Keanu watched as Martin's hand twitched toward the riding crop tucked into his back pocket, a motion that sent a visible shudder through the nearby crew members. But this time, someone was documenting every movement, every word. During a brief break, one of the younger production assistants, Sarah, approached Keanu with trembling hands and a determined expression. "I have videos," she whispered, glancing nervously over her shoulder. "From yesterday, and the day before. I was too scared to do anything with them, but..." Keanu guided her to a quiet corner where Elliot was waiting. As Sarah transferred the files, she described other incidents she'd witnessed, her voice growing stronger with each word. It was as if having someone finally listen, finally take action, had broken a dam of silence. Throughout the day, more crew members found their way to Keanu, each with their own pieces of the puzzle: time-stamped photos, written accounts, even equipment logs that showed suspicious patterns in the handling of Stella. What emerged was a devastating picture of systematic abuse, carefully hidden but extensively documented by people who'd felt powerless to stop it. But Martin, growing increasingly agitated as the day wore on, seemed oblivious to the quiet rebellion building around him. His focus remained on getting his perfect shot, no matter the cost. The breaking point came during the afternoon shoot. Martin, frustrated with Stella's naturally calm demeanor, which he claimed wasn't dramatic enough, ordered everyone except the essential crew away from the set. Keanu, watching from his position in the scene, saw the predatory gleam in the director's eyes. "Clear the set," Martin barked, reaching for the riding crop. "Everyone out. Except you," he pointed at Berto, "keep that animal under control." What Martin didn't know was that multiple phones were now recording from hidden positions. What he didn't realize was that his carefully maintained facade was about to crumble. As he raised the crop, preparing to strike Stella to provoke the reaction he wanted, multiple things happened at once. Berto's hand moved to his chest pocket, where the recorder captured every sound. Sarah's phone, concealed in a nearby equipment case, recorded every movement. And Keanu, no longer willing to maintain the charade, stepped directly into Martin's path. "That's enough," Keanu said, his voice carrying across the suddenly silent set. It's over, Martin. The director's face contorted with rage. Get out of my way, Reeves. This is my set, my production, my... Your criminal behavior. Elliot's voice cut through the tension as she emerged from behind the camera setup, tablet in hand. All documented, all ready to be sent to the proper authorities. Martin's expression shifted from rage to disbelief to calculating suspicion. You're bluffing. No one would dare. We have everything, Keanu interrupted, his voice steady and implacable. Every incident, every threat, every act of abuse. Documented, time-stamped, and witnessed. The only question now is how you want this to end. The writing crop fell from Martin's hand, landing in the dust with a soft thud that seemed to echo across the set. In that moment, the balance of power shifted irrevocably, and everyone present knew it. But as Keanu was about to learn, cornered predators are often at their most dangerous. Martin's next actions would force a confrontation that would change everyone involved, and reveal just how far some people will go to maintain their illusion of control. The sun was beginning to set again, casting long shadows across the set, but the real darkness was yet to come. The confrontation. Martin Langston's face contorted into a mask of calculated fury as he surveyed the circle of crew members who had gathered around him. His hands clenched and unclenched at his sides, the fallen riding crop lying forgotten in the dust at his feet. The late afternoon sun cast harsh shadows across his features, emphasizing the dangerous glint in his eyes. You have no idea what you've done, he snarled, his gaze fixed on Keanu. One phone call, that's all it would take to end every one of your careers. Keanu remained unmoved, his calm presence a stark contrast to Martin's barely contained rage. Make your call, he replied evenly. But first, you might want to check your phone. I imagine it's already buzzing. As if on cue, Martin's phone began vibrating in his pocket. He pulled it out, his face paling as he read the screen. Elliot had been busy during the confrontation, sending their carefully compiled evidence to key industry figures, producers, studio executives, and most importantly, the film's investors. You see, Elliot stepped forward, her tablet displaying a cascade of incoming messages. I wasn't just co-producing this film, Martin. I was brought in specifically to monitor you. Your reputation for difficult behavior had reached the investors' ears long before production began. Martin's composure cracked further. You were spying on me. You had no right. We had every right, she cut him off, her voice sharp. Especially after what happened on your last production. Did you think nobody knew about the stuntman who quit after you pushed him into an unsafe situation? Or the makeup artist who filed a complaint that mysteriously disappeared? Keanu watched as the color drained from Martin's face. The director's carefully constructed world of intimidation and control was crumbling around him, and like many bullies confronted with their own powerlessness, he was about to make one final, desperate play. With surprising speed, Martin lunged toward Stella, reaching for something in his back pocket. But Keanu had anticipated this move. Before Martin could reach the horse, Keanu stepped between them, his movement fluid and decisive. Don't, Keanu warned, his voice carrying an edge that made everyone present freeze. You've lost, Martin. Don't make it worse. But Martin wasn't listening. His hand emerged from his pocket holding a small taser, a cruel tool he'd apparently used before to provoke authentic reactions from animals. You think you can just destroy everything I've built, he shouted, his voice cracking. This is my film. My vision. What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. Martin charged forward, taser crackling. Keanu, drawing on years of martial arts training, moved with practiced precision. In one smooth motion, he deflected Martin's arm, redirecting the taser away from both himself and Stella. The director's momentum carried him forward, off balance. Several crew members rushed forward to help, but it was unnecessary. Martin stumbled, the taser falling from his grasp, and found himself face down in the dirt, Keanu's knee firmly but carefully placed in the middle of his back. Someone call security, Elliot ordered, her voice steady despite the shock evident on her face. And the police. As if emerging from a trance, the crew burst into action. Sarah was already on the phone with local law enforcement, while Berto quickly led Stella away from the scene, speaking to her in soothing tones. Within minutes, the production security team arrived, taking control of Martin. As they led him away, his previous rage had deflated into something darker, a sullen, dangerous silence that spoke of future retribution. But Keanu wasn't finished. Once Martin was secured, he addressed the assembled crew, his voice carrying across the now quiet set. What happened here wasn't just about Stella, he said. It was about every person who's ever been bullied into silence, every animal that's been abused for art, every time someone with power thought they could hurt others without consequences. He paused, making eye contact with various crew members. You all showed incredible courage today. Not just in helping to gather evidence, but in being willing to stand up and say, enough. That's not easy in this industry, believe me, I know. Elliot stepped forward, adding her voice to his. No one here will face retaliation, she assured them. The investors are already aware of everything, and they're standing with us. This production will continue, but under new leadership. As if to underscore her words, police sirens could be heard approaching in the distance. The setting sun painted the sky in dramatic oranges and reds, a fitting backdrop to the day's events. But even as Martin was being led away in handcuffs, spouting threats and promises of lawsuits, Keanu's attention was elsewhere. He walked over to where Berto stood with Stella, the horse surprisingly calm despite the chaos she'd witnessed. Hey, beautiful, Keanu murmured, reaching out to stroke her neck. It's over now. No one's going to hurt you again. Stella nudged his shoulder gently, as if understanding. Around them, crew members were hugging, some crying, others laughing with relief. The tension of months, perhaps years, of fear and silence was finally breaking. As the police took statements and evidence was officially documented, Keanu observed the transformation happening around him. People who had been afraid to make eye contact that morning were now standing tall, speaking freely. The wall of silence that Martin had built through fear and intimidation had crumbled, revealing a stronger foundation of solidarity beneath. But as the adrenaline of the confrontation began to fade, new questions arose. How would this impact the production? What would happen to all the people whose livelihoods depended on this film? And perhaps most importantly, how could they ensure that what happened here would lead to real change in an industry that too often turned a blind eye to abuse? As night fell over Santa Clarita, Keanu knew that while the immediate crisis was over, the real work was just beginning. The next few days would be crucial in determining not just the fate of this production, but potentially how similar situations would be handled across the industry. The lights of police cars painted the location in alternating red and blue, a reminder that sometimes the most important scenes happen after the director calls, cut. Legacy of change. 3 months after the dramatic events at Willow Creek Farm, the California sun once again painted the Santa Clarita landscape in golden hues. But this time, the atmosphere on set was markedly different. Gone was the tension that had previously permeated every corner of the production. Instead, there was a sense of purpose and collaborative energy that made the set feel alive with possibility. Keanu stood near the old barn, watching as Stella trotted gracefully across the field under the guidance of her new handler, Jessica Chen, a renowned animal behavior specialist who had been brought on as part of the production's complete overhaul. The horse's coat gleamed in the sunlight, her movements confident and relaxed, showing no traces of her previous trauma. It's amazing how quickly she's recovered, Elliot observed, joining Keanu at the fence. She looked different too, the weight of secret worry lifted from her shoulders, replaced by the assured bearing of a producer who had helped transform a crisis into an opportunity for industry-wide change. Animals are resilient when they're given the chance to heal, Keanu replied, thinking back to the weeks following Martin's arrest. The story had made headlines, not just in entertainment news but across major media outlets. What could have been a devastating scandal for the production had instead become a catalyst for reform. The investors, far from abandoning the project, had doubled down on their commitment. They'd brought in award-winning director Sarah Chen, no relation to Jessica, to take over, and her vision for the film had evolved into something far more meaningful than Martin's original concept. The documentary crew is coming back next week, Elliot mentioned, scrolling through her tablet. They want to do follow-up interviews for their piece on industry reform. The documentary she referred to had grown out of the events at Willow Creek Farm. What started as a simple news story had expanded into a comprehensive examination of animal treatment in entertainment, featuring interviews with crew members, industry experts, and animal rights advocates. Keanu's involvement had helped ensure the project received the attention it deserved. But the real change had come from within the industry itself. The evidence gathered against Martin had revealed a pattern of abuse that extended far beyond this single production. As more people came forward with their stories, it became clear that systematic changes were needed. "How's the new protocol implementation going?" Keanu asked, referring to the comprehensive animal safety guidelines that had been developed in the wake of the incident. Elliot smiled, pulling up a document on her tablet. "We're actually ahead of schedule. 20 major studios have already adopted the Stella Protocols, and more are joining every week. The Independent Oversight Committee is fully staffed, and they've already begun conducting random set inspections." The Stella Protocols, named in honor of the horse whose story had sparked their creation, represented a fundamental shift in how animals were treated in film and television productions. They mandated transparent reporting systems, independent oversight, and comprehensive training for anyone working with animals on set. But perhaps more importantly, they had helped create a culture where speaking up about abuse, of any kind, was not just protected but encouraged. A group of film students toured the set, part of a new industry initiative to educate the next generation about ethical production practices. Keanu watched as they gathered around Jessica, who was demonstrating proper techniques for working with animals on camera. "Remember," she told them, her voice carrying clearly across the field, "our job is to capture the natural beauty and personality of these animals, not to force them into performing for us." The students nodded earnestly, taking notes and asking questions. Among them was Sarah, the production assistant whose hidden camera footage had proved crucial in building the case against Martin. She had been offered a scholarship to film school by one of the investors, who had been impressed by her courage and commitment to doing what was right. Berto, who had chosen to stay with the production, now served as a consultant for the new protocols, sharing his experiences to help prevent similar situations in the future. He approached Keanu and Elliot, carrying a tablet of his own. "You're going to want to see this," he said, pulling up a news article. Martin's sentencing was just announced. They read the article together. Martin Langston had been found guilty of multiple counts of animal cruelty and workplace harassment. Beyond jail time and fines, he had been banned from working on any production involving animals and would be required to undergo extensive counseling. "It's not just about punishment," Keanu observed, handing the tablet back. "It's about making sure this doesn't happen again." As if to emphasize his words, Stella let out a soft whinny from the field. They turned to watch as she gracefully performed a natural movement that Jessica had patiently worked with her to capture. No force, no fear, just the genuine beauty of an animal feeling safe and respected. The film itself had evolved as well. Under Sarah Chen's direction, it had become a story about redemption, healing, and the courage to stand up for what's right. Early preview audiences had responded powerfully to its themes, suggesting it would reach far beyond the traditional Western genre audience. As the day's shooting wrapped, Keanu made his way over to Stella for their daily check-in. These quiet moments had become a ritual for them both, a reminder of the bond that had formed through adversity. "You did good, girl," he murmured, offering her a carrot. "We all did." Looking out over the set, Keanu reflected on how a single act of standing up against abuse had created ripples that continued to spread throughout the industry. The production that had nearly been derailed by darkness had instead become a beacon of hope and change. The sun was setting over Santa Clarita, but unlike that fateful day 3 months ago, its light seemed to promise not an ending, but a new beginning. In the distance, the crew packed up equipment efficiently, their movements coordinated and relaxed. The fear that had once permeated every interaction was gone, replaced by a sense of shared purpose and pride. Stella nuzzled Keanu's shoulder gently, and he smiled. Sometimes, he realized, the most important roles we play aren't the ones captured on camera, but the ones where we choose to stand up and make a difference. The story of what happened at Willow Creek Farm would be told many times, in many ways. But its true legacy lived on in the changes it inspired, in the industry, in the people involved, and in the countless animals whose lives would be better because someone had chosen to say, enough. As Keanu walked back to his car that evening, he passed the spot where the confrontation with Martin had taken place. The ground showed no signs of that dramatic moment, but its impact continued to resonate through the transformed production and beyond. The real victory, he realized, wasn't just in stopping one person's abuse, it was in helping create a world where such abuse would be harder to perpetrate and easier to prevent. That was a legacy worth more than any box office success.